Mutation defines humanity's relationship with the warp. While most mutations lead to death or worse, one strain elevated its bearers to near godhood. The Navigator gene, jealously guarded by the Navis Nobilite for over 15 millennia, remains humanity's lifeline across the stars. These mutants, blessed with the third eye that peers into the immaterium, guide mankind's vessels through the treacherous currents of the warp. The Navigator houses, ancient beyond measure, occupy a unique position in the Imperium's rigid hierarchy. Neither bound by the Adeptus Terra's direct control nor fully independent, they maintain their own sphere of influence through an intricate web of marriages, alliances, and carefully cultivated secrets. Their greatest weapon remains scarcity. Without them, humanity's interstellar empire would crumble into isolated pockets of civilization, cut off from Terra's light. Navigators pay a terrible price for their power. Their mutation, while controlled, progressively warps their bodies over generations. The older they grow, the more inhuman they become. The most ancient navigators sequester themselves in sealed chambers, their forms too horrific for normal humans to behold. Yet their service remains indispensable, their bloodlines carefully maintained through selective breeding programs that span centuries. The great houses maintain palatial estates on Terra, their spires reaching toward the sky like accusing fingers. Within these gilded cages, they play their own version of the great game, less bloody than the machinations of noble houses, but no less deadly. Assassination through subtle poison, character destruction through carefully placed rumors, and the occasional accident during warp navigation all serve as tools in their arsenal of influence. Each navigator's education spans decades, combining the mystical arts of warp sight with the cold mathematics of stellar cartography. They learn to interpret the ever-shifting tides of the immaterium, to spot the hidden paths that thread between the storms of unreality. This knowledge, passed down through generations, remains their most closely guarded secret, more valuable than any material wealth. The relationship between navigators and their crew walks a knife's edge. Absolute authority during warp travel contrasts with careful isolation during real space transitions. Their mutations mark them as different, their abilities inspire both awe and fear, and their essential role in space travel grants them power that must never be abused too openly, lest it provoke retaliation from the numerous enemies they have accumulated over millennia. Behind every great exploration, every successful military campaign, every trading empire in imperial history, stand the shadows of the Navigator houses. Their influence touches every aspect of imperial society, yet they remain eternally separate, bound by their unique burden and blessing. In their mansions of marble and gold, they plot courses not just through the warp, but through the treacherous waters of imperial politics, always seeking to preserve their position and power. House Belisarius stands paramount among Navigator houses, their influence reaching into the highest echelons of imperial power. Their navigators guide the personal vessels of High Lords themselves, while their genetic lineage remains among the purest, producing navigators of exceptional ability and extended lifespans. Their signature achievement, mapping stable routes through the halo stars, continues to generate immense wealth and political capital. The Novator Senatem, a secretive council of the most influential navigator houses, shapes the destiny of their kind. Representatives from Houses Belisarius, Mercator, and von Skallingdon form its core, though membership shifts according to complex rules of seniority and political maneuvering. The Senatum maintains the delicate balance between houses while presenting a unified front to external powers, particularly the High Lords of Terra. House Mercator specializes in commercial enterprises, their navigators prized by rogue traders and merchant fleets for their expertise in charting new trade routes. Their innovative approach to warp navigation, combining traditional techniques with cutting-edge astronomical data, draws both admiration and suspicion from their peers. Their specialists excel at identifying stable warp corridors through seemingly impassable regions, though their methods remain closely guarded secrets. The Paternova, current title holder being Lord Wanderfield of House von Skallingdon, occupies a unique position as the living nexus of navigator powers. Their mysterious abilities enhance the warp sight of all navigators within the Sol system, making them both invaluable and vulnerable. The selection process for new Paternovas involves complex political maneuvering and occasional violence as houses position their candidates for this supreme position. House Durest maintains the Navi Prima, the central archive of Navigator lore and genealogical records. Their specialists track bloodline purity, arrange marriages between houses, and maintain the ancient technologies used to test for Navigator potential in newborns. Their influence extends beyond mere record-keeping. Their genealogists often determine the fate of entire bloodlines through their pronouncements on genetic compatibility and purity. The Celestarch of House Zantai leads the Novator Militant, an organization of battle-hardened navigators who specialize in military operations. Their expertise proves crucial during major Imperial campaigns, where their ability to navigate through warp storms and predict immaterium disturbances can mean the difference between victory and defeat. The current Celestarch, Lady Morana Zantai, has revolutionized combat navigation techniques through her aggressive interpretation of traditional methodologies. House Van Hawkian's scrutineers maintain oversight over navigator training and certification. Their examiners travel between navigator houses, testing young navigators and ensuring maintenance of ancient standards. Their judgment can elevate or destroy a house's reputation, making them both respected and feared throughout navigator society. Their traditional rivals, House Mercator, frequently challenge their authority over certification processes. The Cult Collegiate, led by representatives from Houses Kaiser and Malaspina, preserves the mystical traditions of navigator training. Their temples house ancient devices used in awakening navigator powers, while their priests maintain the spiritual disciplines necessary for controlling the third eye. Their influence extends into the interpretation of warp phenomena and the development of new navigation techniques. The Navigator's Court, a formal body comprising representatives from all major houses, handles disputes between houses and maintains internal laws. Their judgments, backed by millennia of precedent, carry tremendous weight. The court's arbitrators, drawn from House Malaspina's judicial branch, ensure compliance with ancient agreements and mediate conflicts before they escalate into open warfare. Admiral Chen of House Barbari commands the Navis Nobilite's private security forces, including void-capable ships and elite troops. These forces protect navigator interests across the Imperium, particularly during times of political instability. Their specialized training in dealing with warp-related threats makes them particularly effective against those who would threaten navigator autonomy. Humanity's first encounters with the warp during the Dark Age of technology revealed its utterly hostile nature. Early attempts at faster-than-light travel resulted in catastrophic losses, with entire ships vanishing into the immaterium's endless depths. The discovery of naturally occurring navigators among human populations marked a turning point in mankind's struggle to master interstellar travel. Ancient geneticists working from secure facilities on Terra began systematic attempts to stabilize and enhance the navigator gene. Their experiments, though largely lost to time, created the foundation for the modern navigator houses. These early attempts at genetic manipulation produced numerous failed lines, their horrific results carefully erased from historical records. The successes, however, proved instrumental in humanity's expansion across the stars. The formation of the first navigator houses coincided with humanity's golden age of exploration. These initial families, through careful political maneuvering and strategic marriages, established themselves as indispensable to human expansion. Their monopoly on safe warp travel allowed them to accumulate vast wealth and influence, setting precedents that would endure for millennia. During the Age of Strife, as warp storms isolated human worlds, the navigator houses consolidated their power on Terra. While other institutions crumbled, they maintained their genetic libraries and training facilities, preserving crucial knowledge through the long darkness. Their ability to occasionally pierce the warp storms kept minimal contact between isolated human worlds, preventing complete fragmentation of human civilization. The Emperor's unification of Terra brought significant changes to the Navigator House's position. Initial resistance gave way to careful negotiation, resulting in the Navigator Conventions, ancient agreements that still govern their relationship with the Imperium. These treaties guaranteed their autonomy while binding them irrevocably to humanity's destiny through carefully worded obligations and privileges. The creation of the Astronomicon fundamentally altered warp navigation. Navigator houses that quickly adapted their techniques to utilize this new beacon gained tremendous advantages. Those who clung to older methods gradually lost influence, leading to the first major reorganization of Navigator society. This period established many of the current power dynamics between houses. Competition between Navigator houses during the Great Crusade drove rapid advancement in navigation techniques. The pressure to guide ships faster and more safely through increasingly treacherous warp routes led to innovations still studied in Navigator schools. However, this era also marked the beginning of dangerous breeding programs aimed at producing more powerful navigators. The Horus Heresy forced Navigator houses to choose sides, shattering ancient alliances. Those who sided with the War Master gained temporary advantages, but ultimately faced extinction or exile. Loyalist houses consolidated their position, though the scars of betrayal led to the implementation of extensive oversight measures that continue to influence Navigator politics. The establishment of the Navis Prima after the heresy created a centralized repository of Navigator knowledge and genealogical data. This institution, born from the recognition that scattered records had allowed some houses to hide their treachery, imposed new standards of transparency and accountability on Navigator society. Its creation marked the beginning of the modern era of Navigator organization and governance. Inter-house conflicts during the Nova Terra Interregnum demonstrated the dangers of Navigator disunity. Several houses attempted to establish independent power bases, leading to a series of shadow wars that threatened the stability of warp travel throughout the Imperium. The resolution of these conflicts established many of the current protocols governing house relationships and succession disputes. M23 marked the emergence of systematic Navigator gene identification protocols. House Belisarius pioneered the development of genetic markers that allowed for early detection of Navigator potential in newborns. This breakthrough transformed random discovery into calculated breeding programs, though the price in failed attempts and genetic deviations remained sealed in house vaults. By M25, Navigator houses established their first autonomous enclaves on Terra. The construction of specialized habitat domes, designed to accommodate their increasingly divergent physiologies, created physical spaces that matched their social isolation. These architectural marvels incorporated ancient technologies to shield normal humans from the psychic resonance of concentrated Navigator populations. The age of technology's final centuries saw Navigator houses implementing the first standardized training protocols. House Durest's archivists codified centuries of accumulated knowledge into the Codex Navigationika, establishing universal baselines for Navigator education. Their methods, refined through generations of trial and error, balanced the development of warp sight abilities with psychological stability. M30 witnessed the Navigator House's critical role in the Emperor's Great Crusade. House Xantai's combat navigation techniques proved instrumental in military operations, while House Mercator's trade route optimization supported the massive logistics requirements of expanding Imperial forces. The period saw unprecedented cooperation between houses, temporarily setting aside millennia-old rivalries. During the Horus Heresy, M31 began with the Schism of Navigation. 17 Navigator houses declared for the War Master, their knowledge of secret warp routes proving crucial in the early stages of the conflict. The Loyalist house's subsequent purge of compromised warp charts required decades of dangerous route verification missions, many ending in disaster. M32's Paternova succession crisis reshaped Navigator politics. The simultaneous death of 3 successive Paternovas during failed ascension rituals prompted the creation of the modern selection protocols. House von Scalingden's successful stabilization of the position established their enduring influence over the succession process. The Nova Terra Interregnum of M35 tested Navigator House unity. Several houses attempted to establish independent power bases in the Segmentum Pacificus, leading to the first documented instances of Navigator houses engaging in direct warfare against each other. The conflict introduced new protocols governing inter-house competition and resource allocation. M36 saw the implementation of the genetic reinforcement programs. House d'Arrest's discovery of accelerating genetic degradation in certain Navigator bloodlines prompted aggressive intervention. The resulting breeding protocols, while controversial, stabilized deteriorating bloodlines at the cost of reducing genetic diversity. During M38, the Navigator houses faced the children of the warp crisis. A series of mutations among Navigator offspring produced individuals with unprecedented warp site capabilities, but catastrophic psychological instability. The subsequent purge and genetic screening protocols reshaped breeding practices across all houses. M41's Gatekeeper Concordat represented a major shift in Navigator house operations. The agreement established standardized procedures for sharing navigational data between houses, responding to increasing warp turbulence that made solo exploration increasingly dangerous. This marked the first formal acknowledgement that individual house resources could no longer guarantee safe warp travel. The Cicatrix Maledictum's appearance in M42 forced radical adaptations in Navigator techniques. Traditional navigation methods proved insufficient against the Great Rift's distortions, leading to the development of new warp site disciplines. House Belisarius's breakthrough in mapping stable passages through the rift redistributed power among the houses based on their ability to adapt to new conditions. Recent movements within Navigator society indicate growing concerns about genetic stability and succession. Increasingly frequent mutations and difficulties in producing viable offspring have led to unprecedented levels of cooperation in genetic research between traditionally rival houses. These developments suggest major changes in Navigator society may be imminent. The arrival of the Great Rift shattered millennia of Navigator certainties. Traditional warp routes, mapped and verified through generations of sacrifice, became treacherous overnight. House Belisarius lost 37 of their most experienced navigators in the first month alone, attempting to chart safe passages through the new reality. These losses, unprecedented in scale, forced a fundamental reimagining of warp navigation techniques. Deep within the sealed chambers of House d'Arrest's genetic archives, research teams discovered ancient texts describing alternative methods of warp navigation. These forbidden documents, preserved from the dark age of technology, suggested techniques considered heretical by conventional standards. The decision to implement these methods split the Navigator houses, creating ideological fractures that threatened their unified power structure. Lady Helena von Scalingden's controversial ascension to the position of Paternova marked another crucial shift. Her genetic modifications, secretly developed over 3 generations, allowed her to maintain consciousness during the transformation process. This unprecedented awareness during ascension revealed new aspects of Navigator abilities, though the price of this knowledge manifested in ways that terrified even her closest allies. The Novator Senatem's emergency conclave lasted 17 days, conducted in total darkness to accommodate those whose mutations had progressed beyond tolerance for light. Their deliberations focused on a single question: whether to implement the protocols of genetic divergence. These protocols, authored by House Mercator's most radical geneticists, proposed controlled mutation acceleration to adapt to the new warp conditions. Simultaneously, House Xantai's military navigators reported increasing success rates using modified navigation techniques. Their pilots, drawing upon the increased warp turbulence rather than fighting against it, achieved faster transit times through previously impassable regions. This approach, while effective, aged navigators at an accelerated rate, requiring difficult decisions about resource allocation and pilot survival rates. The Paternova's proclamation changed everything. Lady von Scalingden, speaking through a choir of mind-linked servitors, revealed that the Navigator gene itself was evolving in response to the Great Rift. Her own transformation had granted her visions of possible futures, each showing different paths of Navigator evolution. The houses faced a choice: guide this evolution or be destroyed by it. House Darest's archivists uncovered patterns in their genealogical data suggesting the changes had begun centuries before the Rift's appearance. Subtle mutations, previously dismissed as degradation, appeared instead as evolutionary adaptations. This revelation forced a re-evaluation of countless Navigator bloodlines previously considered corrupted, suggesting new possibilities for genetic rehabilitation. The implementation of the protocols of genetic divergence began with volunteer families from minor houses. These brave pioneers underwent carefully controlled mutation acceleration, supervised by teams of geneticists and biomancers. The results exceeded all expectations and all fears. The survivors displayed unprecedented warp sight abilities, though their physical forms defied description in human terms. The Navigator's court found itself adapting ancient laws to accommodate these new realities. Questions of inheritance and succession became complicated by accelerated lifespans and radical physical changes. Traditional measures of Navigator fitness required complete revision as new abilities emerged that fell outside conventional assessment parameters. Mounting pressure from the Imperium's military needs forced difficult compromises. The demand for navigators capable of piercing the Great Rift's turbulence led to the relaxation of certain genetic purity standards. Houses began experimenting with controlled introduction of specific mutation strains, seeking to balance enhanced capabilities against sustainability of bloodlines. Genetic divergence within Navigator bloodlines accelerated beyond all prediction. Third-generation survivors of the protocols displayed unprecedented abilities, including limited warp site sharing among closely related individuals. House Mercator's enhanced pilots demonstrated the capacity to perceive multiple potential warp paths simultaneously, revolutionizing route planning but requiring extensive psychological conditioning to maintain sanity. Physical transformation among protocol participants progressed along unexpected vectors. Rather than traditional Navigator mutations, subjects developed specialized organs capable of processing warp energy directly. House Darest's modified genealogists discovered these changes strengthened bloodline stability, though the aesthetic cost drove many houses to enhance their isolation protocols and develop new methods of interfacing with normal humans. The Navigator's court underwent radical restructuring to accommodate new realities. Traditional measures of house influence based on bloodline purity and historical precedent gave way to practical evaluation of navigation capabilities. Houses that successfully adapted their bloodlines to post-rift conditions gained prominence, while conservative houses faced declining influence despite their ancient lineages. Battlefield effectiveness of modified navigators altered military dynamics throughout the Imperium. House Xantai's enhanced combat pilots demonstrated the ability to predict and exploit temporary warp rifts, enabling unprecedented tactical maneuverability. This advantage came with increased risk. Pilot burnout rates tripled, forcing the development of new rapid training protocols to maintain combat readiness. Economic power structures within Navigator society shifted dramatically. Houses specializing in stable, established routes found their privileges eroding as new paths through the changed warp demanded innovative navigation techniques. House Belisarius maintained its position only through aggressive adaptation, incorporating modified bloodlines into their carefully maintained genetic programs. The Paternova's enhanced awareness revealed previously unknown aspects of Navigator abilities. Lady von Skallingdon's consciousness spread across multiple dimensions of warp space, detected patterns in warp turbulence that suggested deliberate manipulation by unknown entities. This discovery prompted the creation of specialized investigation teams, combining modified navigators with traditional psychers. Interaction between navigator houses and the Imperium's bureaucracy required careful renegotiation. The Adeptus Terra's initial resistance to modified Navigator bloodlines softened in the face of demonstrated effectiveness, though new protocols for evaluating Navigator purity and sanctioning modifications demanded extensive diplomatic efforts and occasional subtle threats. Training methodologies evolved to accommodate enhanced abilities. The Cult Collegiate developed new meditation techniques, enabling modified Navigators to control their expanded consciousness. Traditional methods of awakening Navigator powers proved insufficient or dangerous for enhanced bloodlines, requiring complete revision of millennia-old training protocols. Inter-house rivalries transformed into complex webs of genetic exchange and ability testing. Houses that previously guarded their bloodlines jealously began cautious collaboration programs, sharing successful modifications while competing to optimize implementation. This cooperation, unprecedented in Navigator history, suggested fundamental changes in their society's structure. Psychological impact on modified Navigators necessitated new support systems. Enhanced perception abilities often came with increased sensitivity to warp phenomena, requiring development of specialized shielding technologies and mental conditioning techniques. House DRS's archives recorded numerous cases of psychological breakdown among early subjects, leading to refined screening protocols for modification candidates. The Novator Senatem established new hierarchies based on successful adaptation rates. Houses demonstrating consistent ability to produce stable modified bloodlines gained influence, while those struggling with implementation faced reduced status. This meritocratic shift challenged traditional power structures, creating tension between ancient authority and practical necessity. Long-term implications for Navigator society remained uncertain. Initial data suggested modified bloodlines might achieve greater stability than traditional Navigator genes, though the social cost of such extensive change generated considerable debate. Questions about the future form of Navigator humanity became central to House politics, driving further experimentation and adaptation. Quantum crystalline augmentation matrices, developed by House Belisarius technomancers, enhanced Navigator perception of warp currents. These devices, surgically embedded within a Navigator's third eye chamber, process and filter warp energies through artificially grown crystals attuned to their user's specific genetic frequency. Each matrix requires decades of careful cultivation, making them among the most valuable Navigator House heirlooms. Chronometric stabilization fields protect Navigators from temporal distortion during extended warp exposure. House Mercator's specialized version incorporates archaeotech recovered from Dark Age ruins, allowing their pilots to maintain temporal synchronization with real space even during extreme warp turbulence. The technology's limited understanding necessitates careful maintenance rituals passed down through generations of House technicians. Psychic resonance chambers enable safe testing of new navigation techniques. These specialized environments, maintained by House Durest, simulate warp conditions while providing multiple layers of containment against psychological breakdown. Advanced versions incorporate modified Geller field technologies to create controlled conditions for training enhanced Navigator bloodlines. The paths of seeing ancient techniques refined through millennia of Navigator experience received significant enhancement through bioneural interface systems. These cybernetic augmentations process vast amounts of warp sensory data, allowing Navigators to perceive multiple dimensional layers simultaneously while maintaining psychological stability through carefully regulated feedback loops. Combat navigation protocols developed by House Zantai incorporate predictive algorithms based on accumulated battlefield data. Their specialized cogitators analyze patterns in warp turbulence created by large-scale military operations, enabling precision drops from warp space even under hostile conditions. These systems require constant updating as warp conditions continue to evolve post-rift. Genealogical preservation arrays maintain the genetic stability of Navigator bloodlines through molecular-level monitoring and correction. House Durest's central facility contains thousands of specialized stasis chambers, each preserving genetic samples from successful Navigator lineages. Advanced biotechnology allows for careful manipulation of stored genetic material to counter degradation effects. The Novator Senatum's secure communication network utilizes modified astropathic technology combined with Navigator-specific encryption protocols. This system enables instantaneous communication between houses across vast distances while remaining undetectable to conventional monitoring methods. The network's maintenance requires regular sacrifice of specially bred psyker servants, their lives consumed to maintain its operation. Warp signature analysis tools allow navigators to identify and track specific vessels through the immaterium. These devices, resembling ornate monocles or elaborate headpieces, process the unique distortion patterns created by different ships and their Geller fields. Master navigators can use this information to predict destination coordinates based on trajectory analysis. Modified suspension chambers protect navigators during particularly hazardous passages. These devices combine life support systems with temporal stasis technology, allowing pilots to enter states of suspended animation while maintaining minimal warp awareness. House Mercator's enhanced version includes emergency translocation systems for worst-case scenarios. The Beacon Array network, maintained jointly by multiple houses, provides calibration points for long-range navigation. These devices, disguised as standard Imperial navigation beacons, emit specific frequencies detectable only by Navigator sight. Their placement required centuries of careful political maneuvering to avoid drawing attention from other Imperial organizations. Psychic dampening systems protect crew members from exposure to enhanced navigator abilities. These technologies became essential as modified bloodlines developed increasingly powerful warp sight capabilities. House Xantai's military vessels incorporate additional layers of protection against psychological contamination during combat operations. The Navigator's Court maintains specialized facilities for testing and certifying new technologies. These verification chambers combine ancient testing protocols with modern analytical systems, ensuring new developments maintain compatibility with established navigator practices while meeting rigorous safety standards. Arch-Navigator Luther Belisarius revolutionized warp travel during the Indomitus Crusade through his mastery of post-rift navigation. His unprecedented ability to perceive multidimensional warp currents enabled fleets to traverse the Great Rift through previously undiscovered paths. Personal logs reveal the terrible price. His enhanced perception accelerated his physical transformation, requiring complete isolation in a specially constructed chamber lined with reality-stabilizing crystals. Lady Ishara Darest's genetic breakthroughs saved 12 Navigator bloodlines from extinction. Her controversial decision to incorporate controlled mutation strains from successful enhanced lineages into degrading bloodlines faced fierce opposition from traditionalist houses. The successful stabilization of these ancient lines eventually vindicated her approach, though she disappeared under mysterious circumstances shortly after implementing her final protocols. Renegade Navigator Corbin Mercator's Betrayal exposed critical vulnerabilities in house security protocols. His sale of classified navigation data to Xenos entities led to the loss of 3 major trade routes and countless lives. The subsequent hunt by House Xantai's specialist teams revealed a complex network of compromised navigators, forcing a complete overhaul of House loyalty screening procedures. Grand Admiral Xavier Xantai's tactical innovations transformed void warfare in the Imperium Nihilus. His enhanced combat navigation protocols, combining traditional techniques with modified navigator abilities, enabled Imperial forces to execute precise strikes through seemingly impenetrable warp storms. His eventual sacrifice, burning out his navigator powers to guide a fleet through the heart of a warp anomaly, saved billions, but raised questions about the sustainable use of enhanced abilities. Master geneticist Helena von Skallingdon's ascension to Paternova marked her as both savior and harbinger. Her conscious transformation revealed new aspects of navigator potential while threatening established power structures. Personal recordings detail her growing awareness of patterns within the warp that suggested purposeful manipulation by unknown entities, leading to her establishment of specialized investigation teams. The notorious Hierophant Malakhy's corruption of House Kaiser's training protocols resulted in the loss of an entire generation of Navigator initiates. His modified awakening rituals, designed to accelerate the development of warp sight abilities, instead created psychological instabilities that rendered subjects unusable. The subsequent purge of compromised training facilities uncovered evidence of deliberate sabotage serving unknown masters. Lady Commander Anastasia Zontai's defense of the Navigator Quarter during the Terran succession crisis preserved crucial genetic archives. Her tactical brilliance in utilizing modified combat navigators to create warp-based defensive perimeters prevented hostile forces from accessing sensitive bloodline data. The techniques she developed continue to influence House security protocols. Arch-researcher Dominique Mercator's discovery of ancient navigation texts in abandoned void stations led to revolutionary developments in enhanced navigator training. Her translation and interpretation of these documents provided crucial insights into controlling accelerated mutations. Her subsequent disappearance into the sealed vaults of House d'Arrest sparked rumors of even more significant discoveries deemed too dangerous for general knowledge. High geneticist Thaddeus d'Arrest's unauthorized experiments with Xenos DNA nearly destroyed 3 minor navigator houses. His attempt to strengthen failing bloodlines through alien genetic material created abominations that required extreme measures to contain. The incident led to increased oversight of genetic research and stricter penalties for deviation from approved protocols. Lord Inquisitor Sebastian Thor's investigation into Navigator House activities revealed complex webs of influence extending far beyond their traditional spheres. His careful documentation of House operations provided crucial leverage for maintaining Imperial oversight while respecting Navigator autonomy. The balance he established continues to influence relations between houses and Imperial authorities. The legendary Navigator Ezekiel Belisarius's mastery of enhanced abilities set new standards for what modified bloodlines could achieve. His successful navigation through theoretical warp spaces demonstrated possibilities previously considered impossible. The price of his achievements, rapid physical deterioration, and eventual transformation into a form that defied description, serves as both warning and inspiration to subsequent generations. Geneticist Prime Victoria. Von Scalingden's development of stability protocols for enhanced Navigator bloodlines ensured the survival of modified lineages. Her methodical approach to controlling mutation rates while preserving beneficial adaptations created the framework for modern Navigator enhancement programs. Her ongoing work from within sealed research facilities continues to influence House genetic policies. Sealed records within House d'Arrest's inner vaults hint at purposeful design in Navigator gene origins. Ancient documents suggest controlled distribution of the mutation during humanity's early expansion, though details remain fragmentary. Attempts to access deeper archives regarding these origins trigger automated security protocols dating back to the Dark Age of technology, their mechanisms defying modern understanding. The disappearance of entire Navigator bloodlines during the Age of Strife remains unexplained. House Mercator's genealogical records indicate several prominent families vanished simultaneously, their genetic signatures showing impossible patterns of mutation. Investigations suggest these bloodlines achieved some form of transcendence, though the nature of this transformation remains hotly debated among House scholars. Recurring patterns in warp currents near Navigator facilities suggest conscious manipulation of the immaterium. Enhanced Navigators report sensing vast geometric structures existing simultaneously across multiple dimensional planes. These patterns demonstrate complexity beyond random formation, leading some to theorize about artificial construction within warp space itself. The existence of shadow houses, Navigator families operating outside traditional power structures, continues to trouble House leadership. Reports surface periodically of independent Navigator bloodlines maintaining their own genetic programs and navigation techniques. Their apparent ability to avoid detection by established houses suggests capabilities beyond conventional navigator abilities. Unexplained resonances between certain navigator bloodlines and specific regions of space-time raise questions about predetermined genetic adaptation. House Belisarius researchers documented cases where particular family lines demonstrated unusual affinity for navigating certain warp routes, as if their genetic structure responded to hidden patterns in reality itself. The true purpose of ancient navigator artifacts recovered from dead worlds remains contested. These devices, incorporating both technological and biological components, respond only to navigator presence. Some specimens show signs of modification to human form that predate known navigator mutations, suggesting alternative evolutionary paths not recorded in house archives. Classified reports detail encounters with entities that mirror navigator abilities, but originate from unknown sources. These beings, detected solely through warp sight, demonstrate capabilities that parallel enhanced navigator powers while operating under completely different principles. Their appearances often coincide with significant shifts in warp currents affecting established trade routes. The phenomenon of synchronized mutation among physically separated navigator bloodlines defies explanation. House DRS's monitoring stations recorded instances where genetically unrelated navigators underwent identical mutations simultaneously across vast distances. These events show no correlation with known warp phenomena or documented genetic patterns. Ancient prophecies preserved by the cult collegiate speak of a final navigation, a mysterious event involving mass navigator evolution. These texts, written in ciphers that become readable only to those with active navigator genes, describe transformation beyond current understanding of human potential. Different house interpretations of these prophecies drive much of their current genetic experimentation. The discovery of dormant navigator genetic markers in standard human populations raises questions about the mutation's true distribution. House genealogists periodically detect these latent genes in individuals with no known navigator ancestry. These findings suggest wider distribution of navigator potential than previously believed, though activation methods remain uncertain. Unexplained variations in navigator power levels correlating with celestial events suggest unknown influences on their abilities. House Xantai's military divisions documented cases where navigator effectiveness increased dramatically during specific astronomical alignments. These patterns follow no known scientific principles, hinting at deeper connections between warp sight and universal structures. The persistent legends of pure navigator bloodlines achieving perfect harmony with warp space drive continue genetic research. Historical records mention cases where individual navigators demonstrated abilities far beyond normal limitations without suffering usual mutations. These accounts lack verification but influence house breeding programs seeking to replicate such theoretical perfect forms.